Hello, welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. I'm Glenn Sollers, and good morning. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning, went to bed at 9 p.m. last night. It's amazing what daylight savings time does to you, and the fact that here where I live at 6:30 at night now, it's dark, and then by 9 o'clock I'm thinking, hey, it's time for bed, and then voila, I'm up at 4 a.m. It has been a very productive morning for me, I must say. I had my coffee, watched a bit of the news, got some important work done that I was going to put off until Monday next week, and now I'm recording the podcast at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning. I want to talk about defensiveness today and owning our defensiveness in relationships, at work, wherever we are. There's probably people there that we communicate with that can be defensive at times, which can, for me, create fear, anxiety, a reluctance to say anything, and a reluctance to even get into dialogue because it's like walking on eggshells. And we might trip over a wire and then an explosion happens. And that's a challenge because in any team, such as work team, marriage, wherever you might be, it's important to be able to communicate and to share what's going on with one another, not to hold back, because that can lead to resentment, avoidance, chronic issues, and eventually an explosion and perhaps a breakup of a team, loss of a company, the loss of a marriage, who knows. It's important to have discussions about things, but also to ensure that they're healthy discussions, which means I think we need to remove our defensiveness in some cases and know when people are bringing something up, it's because they really care. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring it up. This is something that's been on my mind, and I want to share it with you in order to help improve things. But quite often we look at feedback as a criticism, that there's something about me that's not right. And it's easy to respond to somebody and say, you know what, I'm always the problem. You always point out my weak points, or I can do nothing right. That is a character assassination. And feedback is not intended to be a character assassination. Feedback is intended to be, generally speaking, there's a certain thing that you're doing or saying, also known as a behavior, and it is not meeting my expectations. That's it. It's a difference of opinion. It's not intended to normally degrade the other person and take away their humanity. With this mindset, it is much easier to give feedback, and I teach leaders and employees how to give feedback all the time. And for me, it is a way of building trust. It's a way of building respect, setting healthy boundaries, making sure things get done, optimizing performance. There's so many benefits in giving feedback, but many of us are reluctant to do so because of what I believe is defensiveness. And I hear a lot of people say that, yeah, I don't want to give feedback to this person because they'll just get upset with me. It could ruin the relationship. But then you're silently ruining the relationship anyway by just avoiding it and playing nice. That causes stress. That's not good for your mental health. And let me just have a little sip of coffee here. Yummy. The thing to be mindful of with defensiveness is to actually have a discussion about it and to be self-aware in terms of, why am I getting defensive? Why am I taking this so personally? When I take something personally, there's probably an element of truth in what the person is telling me. So I know it exists, and therefore I'm going to fight back. But if I didn't feel it was the truth, then I'm not going to be upset about something. I'm just going to say, okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's something I need to change. I appreciate you telling me, because we all have blind spots. We all have things that we don't know that we're doing that have an impact on other people. And I use this analogy all the time. Has anybody ever told you, I don't like the tone of your voice? And you're saying, I don't have any tone. But then you talk to other people and they all agree, yeah, that person does have a tone, but that person's not aware of a tone. And I had a tone before, and that impacted how I facilitated my workshops. My tone would show up, and somebody finally said, Glenn, you have a tone. You need to figure that out. And I realized it came from a need of being right, a need of perfectionism. And when somebody told me I was wrong or they didn't agree with what I had to say in a workshop, I would get defensive. I now have to manage that. I realize where it comes from. And there's a course I teach called Authentic Communication. And part of the course talks about what are those things that may trigger you, where you either become too authentic. And when I say too authentic, I mean you might become defensive, verbose, swear, whatever it might be. That's being too authentic, because that can create a lack of safety for the other individual or individuals that you're in a conversation with. And therefore, they're not going to speak up. And you might experience this if people don't talk to you, or you're in meetings and you ask, is everybody okay? Do you agree with this? And you hear crickets. Then there's inauthenticity, which is, I'm not going to say anything at all. I'm just going to hold back, which is not being an authentic me at all. And there's a balance between the two of too authentic, inauthentic versus, I just wonder what that person's going through. I wonder why they feel that way. I wonder what I can do differently. I'm sure they care about me. Let me understand a bit more about this. Because if I lived in a round room with no friends and nothing, then it's okay. I don't have to worry about my defensiveness because I'm not interacting with people. But once I start going out there in the world, my need for recognition and perfectionism shows up everywhere. And that leads to defensiveness. When people do something that doesn't align to my expectations, maybe I need to look at that and find out what that is. And we all have different things that we get defensive about. So step number 1 is to consider, when do I get defensive? What do people do or say where I notice I feel like I need to defend myself? I need to put up my shield. And sometimes I'll take my sword out and cause more damage because my shield is so strong. And I want to show you that you're the problem, not me. So I can take out my sword and do a bit of jabbing there. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into a lot of gore here. Another sip of coffee. 6:14 a.m. And then we injure the other person just because they brought something up. You know what? You only want to fight so many battles before you just want to give up and surrender and leave. Because why? Why keep on fighting when somebody has their shield up and they will stab you back? And that's the sad truth in a lot of situations, is if we're both willing to lower our defenses and to start to understand what the other side is going through, why it's important to the other side, knowing that generally speaking, we have good intentions. But some of us are not willing to do that. And it has a long-term consequence. I invite you all to talk to people that you feel will tell you the truth. And the challenge is if you're defensive, people may not tell you what's going on because you're defensive. And they don't want to deal with that. So a great way to start off a conversation is to say to somebody, I know I can be defensive at times and I want to change. I would like to get your feedback. Asking questions to that person. How do I show up when I'm defensive? What did you notice in those moments? What do I do? What is the impact I have on you? But being curious, and also don't get defensive when those people respond to you, because then you just shut them down and it's not going to do anything other than create maybe more resentment or validation for the other person that, yeah, you are indeed defensive and here you go again. So your job is just to shut up and listen. That's it. And say, thank you for sharing that. And then you're going to want to do a bit of a deeper dive And some of the questions I ask in authentic communication, because this would be the next step, is to understand, well, why do I get so defensive? Anthony Robbins stated something in one of his videos that I'll never forget, and that is, who did you need to be when you were younger to get love? How did you learn to be? How did you have to be to get acceptance? And you may find a tie in there around why you get defensive now. So for me, I had to be perfect. I had to try harder. And therefore, when somebody calls me out on something where I don't do that, then I get defensive. And this might be an eye-opening experience for you because you carry that around with you. So when somebody tells you some feedback and you get defensive, they're actually giving you a present saying, you have some issues there. You need to work on if you're getting defensive about this. This is not about me. This is about you. Because what defensive people do is they tend to come back and project things onto you. No, you're the problem. You're the reason this is happening. And it's like a steamroller. You can't win. But take ownership of what people are doing. I heard in a video recently, this guy was saying, in order to be happy, you need to become frictionless. And I love that metaphor. Like, just not let things bother you. And to listen to people. And to find out what's going on. But if you're taking it personally, there's a deeper issue there. It's not about the other person. They're just giving you the feedback. You need to work on you. And perhaps if you do that, then you can work with the other person and say, yeah, you know what, you're right. I do this. And this is what I will need from you to support me on this venture of becoming less defensive in my way of being. You have to be open to the conversations. You have to have self-awareness. You have to be willing to dive a bit deeper and not just push things off onto the other individual. That doesn't create trust. It doesn't create teamwork. It doesn't create vulnerability. So this ties a lot into emotional awareness. In these moments when I get defensive, how do I feel? What is it saying about me? What do I need to do? Is it true? Are their intentions really malicious? Probably not. And then reframe your thinking so that in those moments when somebody does give you feedback, you can breathe, say thank you, and have a discussion that's safe for both sides. Many organizations I work with, the reason that teams become dysfunctional is due to a lack of feedback. Maybe the leader's defensive. Maybe there's a team member that's defensive. And then people start to shut down. And you see this happening all over the world, where people are shutting down. They're taking out their ammunition. They're fighting back, resolving nothing. And it's sad to see that, because most of us want to be valued and do something of value. Most of us want the best out of our relationships. And we have to be willing to be introspective and know that wherever we go, there we are. What am I doing that may be helping or hindering a relationship? How do I manage those defenses? When did those defenses start? Who started those defenses? So when so-and-so is telling me something, maybe it's another voice. Maybe the voice of a parent, the voice of a sibling, the voice of an uncle or aunt, the voice of a school teacher. Not that person. That person is just telling your brain, hey, remember this? Yeah, so-and-so did this to you. They're doing it to you. Be defensive. Build that awareness, and then you'll build relationships. You'll open up yourself to others, and it will create love, connection, and community. And folks, as a reminder, that's my mission with this podcast, is to create that through owning up to our own stuff. We can't control others. We can't change others. But if we're able to change ourselves and control ourselves, we'll have a greater ability to influence how other people are with us and how we are with other people. Lots of love to all of you out there. Reminder, please like this podcast if you like it. Share it with friends as well. I think we're seeing a mental health crisis unfold in the world. And tools like this, I hope, get out there so that we can actually reduce the crisis, focus on those things that are really important in our life, and build community, build love, build respect. Thanks for listening.